Could I just get your name for the camera?
My name's Angie Zelter.
My name is Anne Cummings.
Cool. Alexandra Ford.
Yes, I'm Frances Thomas.
John Neville Greaves.
Thorne Moore.
Okay, my name's Jenny Ogden.
I'm Deborah Moggach.
Guy N. Smith.
My name is Ian Marchant.
Jenny Lloyd.
Well, I'm Katy Mac. Well, that's my nom de plume, as it were.
Yeah, my name's Martin Redfern.
My name is Hugh Purcell. That's spelt like the composer. It's actually pronounced Purcell. But for various reasons, everybody says Purcell, including me.
Oh gosh, that's a tough question. So I've always been fascinated by stories.
Well, because I can't do anything else. Because I like making stories from nothing. I like making up characters and giving them a life.
What brought me to writing was basically that I wanted people to know what ordinary people were doing and thinking and why they were involved in the peace movement.
Well, I've always enjoyed reading and I've always enjoyed words. I forgot to say out there that words have emotions as well as meanings, and you've only got to listen to some politicians to realise that, because they're saying the right words but the emotions are all wrong because they're not going to do what they say they.
And once you've sort of cracked it, once you've done one or two, you think, you know, I'm one of the few people in the world who know how to do this. So it's my craft. I know how to do it.
I write primarily because this world that we live in is just so fascinating. There are so many unanswered questions, so many questions with exciting answers. I'm just really perpetually a curious child.
I write because I suppose I feel I don't have any choice. You get an idea into your head and it sort of bangs away, and the only way of sorting it out is to start writing a story.
It so happened that I hit on it eventually and wrote the first draft of that first novel in about 4 months, full on. Took over my life completely.
Both as a non-fiction writer and as a fiction writer. One of my favourites is a guy called Richard Beard, whose novels are experimental in tone.
Oh gosh, loads. So earlier on, it was sort of like magical realists, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I read loads of his work, his short fiction particularly.
Leslie Charteris, Edgar Wallace, Sapper.
Lots. I learned a lot from Beryl Bainbridge, now unfortunately not with us, but she wrote wonderful books, and she pared books down to the essentials, but not the boring bones. She pared them down to the odd essentials of life.
Crime, in my genre, Barbara Vine, as in Ruth Rendell, one of her personas.
Well, I think anything. I mean, I like history, so a lot of my ideas have come from history or mythology, but often it's just things in the world around you that just excite your imagination, and you want to know what makes them tick, what they're all about, and you start exploring an idea and it turns into a story.
Right, my family history, because the first novel, Leap to Wild Water, that the initial inspiration came from something that I'd found while I was researching my family history, something that happened to my three times grandmother.
I think it was a feeling that we had something which was this particular meat which had really gone out of fashion. People would say mutton and it was almost a derogatory word. You know, mutton dressed as lamb and that sort of thing. And yet it was a fantastic eating experience.
I draw inspiration from my characters, because if they've got real life to them, they start to tell me their story. And a lot of writers will say that. So they become my inspiration, but I have to know them really well before I start writing. Because if you don't know them very well, and you don't know what they'd be like if they came into this library or what they're wearing and stuff, if you don't know them well, you don't know what sort of story they're going to tell you.
I enjoy the writing. I enjoy writing what I want to say without being puerile, as lucidly and as simply as possible.
Advice to people who are aspiring to write is just write and practice writing. Anything that you want to do in life, the more you practice it, the better you become.
You've got to be absolutely passionate about the thing you're writing. It's got to fascinate you so much that you want to share that fascination. That's the first and foremost thing.
Read a lot. Write regardless. Think about how good it is after you've written. If you have the urge to write, just keep writing. If and when you've got something together, get a really good editor who tell you where you're going wrong.
Sit down and do it. I think I find the hardest thing is actually sitting down and making yourself write. Because I'm always terrified if I stop writing, I won't pick it back up again. If I get lazy, I won't keep, So the routine has been really important, but also don't, it's all a really long process. Don't be disheartened when it takes a while for things to happen.
What you've got to do is sit down for, let's say a year, let's say 3 hours a day for a year, and write. And at the end of that, you'll have something that's rubbish. But what you'll have is a book-shaped, enough stuff to write a book. So then you go back and do it again. So writers write and writers read. That's the best advice. That's the only advice.
No, that's a good question, because I'm doing a lot of research into depression. There's a lot of depression around. There's a lot of kind of stuffy books on depression. There's some very interesting new books coming in which are bringing in different ideas. So that's kind of what I'm working on.
I want to write a proper book. I hope one that's never been written before, and it will be actually about the archaeology of fire, how early humans first created fire, what it did for us as a species, how it brought about the dawn of civilization, and intertwined in with that some of the mythology of fire and indeed the geology of fire.
At the moment, I've been making butterflies this summer. I started off making 4 of our native species, which are dependent on nettles, because the caterpillars eat nettles. So I made 4 small tortoiseshell, peacock, red admiral and comma butterflies and their respective caterpillars as a way of flagging up how important nettles are to wildlife.
I'm quite interested in what we get like when we get older, as I'm now 70, and I've turned Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, which was a film now, I've turned that into a stage play for Chichester Theatre, which would be great if they did that. I mean, they've asked me to do it, but I don't know if they liked it, because I haven't heard from them yet. But that would be great, because you can have nice elderly actors and a big Indian cast as well, and it would be rather interesting to see them on the stage.
I am working on, I've got 3 books sort of lined up, but one of them I'm really working on is a prequel to my first novel, A Time for Silence. And it just takes, that story went from the 1930s to the present day, and this goes from the 1880s to the end of the First World War. I am working on, I've got 3 books sort of lined up, but one of them I'm really working on is a prequel to my first novel, A Time for Silence. And it just takes, that story went from the 1930s to the present day, and this goes from the 1880s to the end of the First World War. But it fills in the gaps of some explanations of why people were the way they were in the time for silence.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For taking the time.
Thank you very much.
And it was great to hear your talk as well.
Great.
Really entertaining. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Pleasure.
Thanks for taking the time.
Not at all. Great.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
That's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, great pleasure.
Okay.
Is that what you wanted?
That's great. That's perfect.
Okay. Righty-ho.
Thank you. Okay. Oh.
Anyway, okay.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Cheers, Rob.